Hi, this is Swan with Swan Amity Studios, and if you have been watching what I've been doing with the dancers and their little pedal dresses, we talked about ditching with your free motion foot in that video, and some little tricks about slowing down and positioning your hands and maintaining control. So now we have our walking foot attached, and we're doing that because we're doing a lot of straight lines in the sashing in between the dancers. So we want to not necessarily have to control the free motion foot that way the whole time. And we're not doing any design motifs in that sashing. So it makes sense to go ahead and swap out for the walking foot. Now, the walking foot benefits, of course, if you've used yours, you know. The goal of the walking foot is to feed the fabric on the top of the quilt through at the same rate as the feed dogs are moving the base of the quilt through the machine. Now, in this case, you notice I'm still wearing my gloves. I want to make sure that I have good control over how I am moving the quilt through the machine. But since the walking foot and the feed dogs are now moving at the same rate, all we're really doing is providing guidance. So again, I'm not going to move super fast. I have my machine set to slow, and all I'm doing is making sure that the seam where I'm ditching is moving through the machine easily and straight. And to do that, I'm not necessarily pushing on anything. I want the feed dogs to do the job, and because I don't have to provide any motion with my hands, all we're doing is letting the machine pull the quilt through and making sure that we are providing guidance. And because all we're doing is guiding, we want to make sure that we're not pushing or tugging on the quilt. We're just keeping everything nice and straight. Now, when you have really skinny sashing like this too, sometimes that does mean you're going to spend just a little time kind of pulling the sashing apart just a little bit. Not dramatically, I'm not looking to tug. I just want to keep everything nice and flat while it feeds through the machine. And I'm keeping my eye on that seam the whole way down so that everything stays neatly aligned. I want to be as close to the edge of the seam as I possibly can. Now, while we're coming through the machine all the way to the end there, we've gone one direction with one seam, and we have one other straight long seam connecting everything. So all I'm going to do here is lift the presser foot with the needle down in the fabric, turn the project, and I'm just going to stitch over to the other side of that long sashing strip that connects the blocks. I'm going to turn that and line up once again my walking foot with the other side of the seam. You can see how well we did on this side, just guiding everything through. We have a nice neat line of stitching right up next to the ditch, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now notice that I changed directions. I didn't take the whole thing out of the machine and come back at it from the same direction. And that's because when we're stitching those nice big long straight lines all the way from one side of the quilt to the other, we want to make sure that we go one direction and then the opposite direction so that the fabric is not pulling all in one direction. And you might say, well, Swan, we have the walking foot on, everything's moving easily and evenly through the machine. And that sounds right, it does. But if you were to stitch all those long lines all in one direction, you would notice that you would end up with a little bit of a slant to your quilt. everything would kind of be slightly dragged in that direction that you've been stitching in. Not dramatically so, but enough that over the course of a whole project you would notice it. So when working with your walking foot, you want to go one direction and then the other. And remember, all we're doing here is moving nice and slow, and we're making sure that we are guiding everything through the machine evenly. Now when we get all the way to the end like that, we can go ahead and just cut our thread and admire our nice, neat, straight, right in the ditching lines. Look how good those look. Let's get close here for a second and see how close to the edge we really got. And that's great. That's exactly what we're looking for. I'm going to complete this project by stitching into and around all of those little sashing pieces. All of these finish at 1 inch, so they're nice and close to each other. However you decide to finish the sashing in your dancers is entirely up to you. And of course, perhaps you're watching this video and you're not making the dancers. Maybe you're just looking for tips on how to get nice and close to that seam allowance. And if you are, wonderful. I hope you're doing a great job. Make sure you're moving at your comfortable pace. That will be different for everyone. Maybe you're a little faster than I am. Maybe you're a little slower. Either way, the goal is always beautiful, neat stitches right up close to that seam allowance. And whether that takes a little more time, that's not the important part. The important part is that they are that beautiful. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you again. We are getting ready to do so many fun things. So go ahead and like and subscribe. And I will see you again. Happy stitching!